the lesson video link in place of last Thursday lesson on the 22nd September. So we're doing revision tutorial 11, and we have already done question 1 to 4 the previous week. So now we hop on to question number 5 onwards. Now, as usual, we always start off with SOAR, which is to simplify by highlighting all the key information in this question in order for us to identify the topic, and then narrow down to the concept so that we can find the appropriate keywords. All right. So in this question, we have Jenny here. She conducted an experiment to find out how the height at which seed P is dropped would affect the distance it travels, and P has a wingspan of 5 cm. So just probably based on the first sentence, we should be able to find out what is the change variable and what is the measured variable. Okay, so over here, the change variable would be the height. Yep, so in which this case, for different setup that she's going to conduct, the height is going to be positioned at different heights. Yep, so the distance traveled basically would be the measured variable, what she will be measuring for her experiment in order to make a conclusion. Okay, so the wingspan is down here. Now, from here, we can easily tell that the topic we're talking about and dealing with here is plant reproduction. Yep, and looking at seeds, yep, we know that it is talking about dispersal. Seed dispersal, it can either be dispersal or it can be germination, but in which this case, because we are talking about the wingspan, so we know it's going to be a dispersal question. All right. Yeah, as now that I know the topic, I know the concept, I know what are the words that I'll be focusing on. So let's say that if you're looking at your summary map, so same thing, we have our dispersal under plant reproduction. So what kind of dispersal we have? We have the importance of dispersal, which is to prevent overcrowding, to reduce competition. Okay, and the type of dispersal we will be dealing with is animal, wind, explosive action, and water. Yep, and knowing that it's about the wingspan, we know they fall under this category. Okay, so in which this case, we know that this particular seed P will be dispersed by wind. Okay, so now next, she dropped P from a height in front of her fan and measured the distance traveled by P. She repeated by dropping from different heights. So this is another way to confirm that the change variable will be the height. And she recorded the finding down here. So H is the height at which the seed is dropped, and D is the height at which is length. Okay, so as we can see from this relationship down here, we will always be dealing with the largest value and the smallest value. All right, so when you look at this, as the height increases, or rather as the height decreases, as shown in this graph, okay, we can see that the distance that it lengths actually decreases as well. Okay, so when it is at a greater height, it can travel further away. When it is at a nearer height, it will travel nearer or less further. All right. So now based on general result, what is the advantage for P to be found on tall trees? Yeah. So the question specifically said that you have to use the results, and her conclusion of the result is that greater height is equivalent to further distance dispersed. Yeah. So this is what we can conclude from her setup, and we have to use this conclusion to fit into this application. So then we have to try to align how would this seed P dispersal on a tall tree be aligned with what her experiment conducted. Okay, so you can see tall tree basically means a greater height. Yep, so if tall tree is of a greater height based on her results, the conclusion of the results, we will be expecting the seeds to disperse further away, right? So now, so let's say that we are doing our 3C analysis. All right, C1 is the change. So what was the change? Tall tree was the change. So it could be at a normal height, it could be a tall tree, it could be the short tree. So C1 is going to be the height. All right, now C2, which is our concept. So what is the concept that would be involved in height? All right, essentially it's pretty much given to us. It's pretty much given to us, the results. So we can weave that into our concept. So we have a greater height means further dispersal. Okay, greater height, further dispersal. So what do we learn about being able to disperse further? How would being able to disperse further be an advantage for CP? An advantage is the consequence C3 that we need to reach eventually. Right? C3 means the consequence, what is the result at the end? So in this particular questions, the result at the end they are looking for is that it has to be an advantage for CP. Yep. So from greater height, further dispersal, how would it be an advantage for the seed? And this is the theory that we have learned, we have picked up in the summary map, we have picked up in our lecture notes. When a young plant can be dispersed further away from the parent plant, it will reduce overcrowding. So this is essentially a question that asks about the advantage of dispersal. All right. And when there is less overcrowding, you will have less competition for resources. All right, and the resources we are specifically talking about things like sunlight, water, mineral salt, and space. All right, so then during the what they call that rationalization, you can list down all the resources. All right, and then it will be an advantage, right? Because when you have less competition, you will have better growth. There's a higher chance of better growth, and that would lead on to an advantage. So now we have our C1, C2, C3 in place. We know that our answers are complete. All right, so to re-emphasize why it's important for C1, C2, C3 is to make sure that you have built in the concept into the answer. Otherwise, a typical English way of answering would just be C1 and C3. Like for instance, they ask you, what is the advantage to be found on tall trees? Then you would just reply, oh, being found on a tall tree, okay, is good for CP because it can travel further, full stop. So we are lifting off whatever the information that is presented in the questions without anything that comes from the concept map, from our notes, from the concept that we learned outside this question. All right, a typical English answer is basically looking like a lift and paraphrase. So if your answer is completely found in the question, and basically you're just paraphrasing it, then you know it's an English answer without any science concept. And this type of answer, we will not be getting a score for it. All right, or you might get marks deducted. Yeah. So here, now that you have C1, C2, C3, you have to make it into your OFL. You have to just present all this answer into your OFL, and that will bring us to answer that looks like this. It can be dispersed further away from the parent plants, and hence reduce overcrowding and competition for the resources that I talk about, sunlight, water, and mineral salt, and space, so they can grow, or rather, so they can grow better. All right, or they have a higher chance to grow better. All right, so this is what you can put down as an answer. You have to make sure that you have your concept in, which is greater height, further dispersal means there will be less overcrowding, there will be less competition for resources. So this information is not found in the question. So in which this case, I know that this falls under my concept. Okay, so I know that my answer is a scientific answer. The scientific answers includes the concept, but just an English answer is lift and paraphrase. All right. Now next. In the second experiment, Jenny wanted to find out how the size of the wing affects the distance travel. So now her aim has changed. Size of the wings affect distance travel. So size of the wings is now my CV, and then distance travel is now my NV. All right. So knowing that, apart from the CV and the NV, every other variable in the setup must be constant in order for the test to be fair. So the question asks you suggest two variables that has to be kept constant. Yep. So be aware about the numbers of variables to be given because some of the students might just put down one. All right. So as we said before, the variables, you try to use variables that would directly affect the results. Things that is less important, for instance, would be like for the color of the seat. Okay, we know that the color of the seat is not going to affect the distance travel. So we try not to use this type of setup that is not really so much affecting the results. Okay, so with that, what are the variables? We know that the height will affect, so then the height has to be constant, height at which the seat is dropped. Okay, this has to be constant because we know based on the previous experiment, when it is higher, it can travel further. All right, since now my CV is the wing, the size of the wing, I got to make sure that the height will not affect. All right, and the other one, for wind dispersal, the wind speed is very important. For any seeds or fruits that are dispersed by wind, all right, it is very important for them to maintain a certain wind speed if you are not testing how the amount of wind will affect distance travel. Because we know that when there's stronger wind, your seed will tend to travel further. And you don't want that to directly affect this experiment that she wants to conduct. All right. Now next. State a possible conclusion of her second experiment. Okay, this is just a recap on the experimental terms. What is conclusion? Answer the aim. All right, and we know that her aim, let me just lift off, her aim is how the size of the wing will affect the distance travel. So the conclusion is to give an answer to answer this aim. And based on what we learned, all right, so let's say my C1 is actually size of wing. Okay, so what is the concept that we learned about? When you have a, or rather when you have a bigger size, bigger wings, it leads on to a greater exposed surface area to the wind. And when there's a greater exposed surface area to the wind, it will tend to float in the air longer, stay afloat longer. And when it can stay afloat longer, it will be able to scatter further. All right, and of course, it is better for plants to scatter further away from the parent plants so that they can not compete for all the resources that we mentioned at the previous question. All right, yeah. So yeah, scatter further. Let me just double check again. Oh yes, yep. So here I already got my C3 because I want to give an answer about how the winds affect the distance travel. And here I end up with scattered further, which means it travel further away. Then of course you gotta give a reason for your choice. Yep. So now we with our C1, C2, C3 in our OFL. The outcome is basically what is the conclusion that we want to give to this aim. The larger the size of the wing, the further distance it will travel. So this is basically what we have. And we have to put in the link. The link comprises of the concept, which is larger wing give us a greater exposed surface area to the surrounding, so they can stay afloat in the air longer and be scattered further. All right, so I just cut this off so it can be more obvious. All right, yeah, just let me, okay, and this, I move it away. Yeah, so this is the complete answer for this. Yep, so in terms of what I mentioned, when it comes to concept, okay, you can see that greater exposed surface area to the surrounding air is not found in our question at all. So we know that this is the concept to this question. All right. Yeah, so it's very important to re-emphasize again, C1, C2, C3 is to help you to make sure your answer is a science answer that is together with the concept. All right. Now next one. Question 6. Study the diagram of the flowers X, Y, Z. Some part of the flowers have been removed. All right. So as I mentioned, any question in terms of plant reproductions involving flowers is going to be either pollination or going to be fertilization. It will not reach to dispersal or germination because we have not been seeing the fruits and the seeds at this point of time. All right. And the question asks you which flower developed into a fruit. First thing we know, what is a fruit? A fruit came from an ovary. All right. And a fruit can only be produced, can only be produced when the ovary has been, or rather, when the female egg cell has been fertilized by the male reproductive cells in the pollen grain, right? So we know that it also needs the ovule. Okay, so they will need an ovary, it will need the ovules. Eventually, the ovules becomes the seed and the ovary becomes the fruit. And the function of the fruit is to protect the seeds. All right, so all fruits that are naturally produced, they will bear seeds. All right, so which flowers will develop into a fruit? Then if you take a look at these flowers, flower X, you can see that the ovary is there. Okay, the ovary is there as well. Yeah, so with the ovules and the ovaries, the flower will be able to fertilize and will becomes a fruit. All right, now it also have the stigma and the style, which is also an advantage because let's say that if pollination has not taken place at first, all right, having the stigma and the style is important in order for the pollen to fall to land on the stigma and grow a pollen tube to transfer the male reproductive cells into the ovule. But if, let's say, it has already been pollinated, the stigma and the cell can be cut off. Fertilization can still happen as long as we can be sure that the male reproductive cell has already been transferred into the ovule. Alright, now next, flower Y, we can see that there is no ovary at all, so clearly you wouldn't be having any fruits. Now flower Z, it has the entire female reproductive part alongside with the male reproductive part, so surely flower Z will also becomes a fruit. So both X and Z will becomes a fruit. Alright, so our outcome would be X and Z, flower X and flower Z. So what is the fact we knew about both flower X and flower Z that will assist to develop into the fruit is that both have stigma, ovary, and ovule. Okay, so in this case, even if previously it has not been pollinated, as long as stigma is present, they will still be able to pollinate and fertilize to develop into a fruit. And what is the link? Link answers how having this means X and Z will develop into a fruit. How the fact answer the outcome. And this would be what we have. The stigma can still be receiving the pollen grain, so the male reproductive cell can fertilize the ovule in the ovary to produce the fruit. Alright? Or usually we will put in female reproductive cells in the ovary that is found in the ovule that is found in the ovary to produce fruit. Right? So this would be the complete answer to get our 2 marks. Okay, next. So a flower J insect K found in a garden. Insect K visits flower J frequently. The table shows the information about J and insect K. Yeah. So the flower itself has large and brightly colored petals. And then the flower also have the male and the female parts on different flower. All right, which means that, example, let's take a look at X, Y, and Z. So this particular flower J, they will have a male flower and then a female flower. Yeah, this one, a female flower, growing separately. All right, so in order for the female parts to be pollinated, they definitely need a pollinator. All right, and why do we know that they need a pollinators instead of wind? Is because of the features of the flowers, which is it has large and brightly colored petals. All right, so you can recap from reproduction summary map. You can see for animal pollinated flowers, they will have all these characteristics. All right, brightly colored, large petals, scent flowers. All right, now during exams, I will also suggest not to use scent flower. Maybe I should change it instead. It would be better to say just strong smell. Alright, because something that is scented to you may not be scented to me. Alright, so scent could be something that's more subjective, so we try not to use that. So strong smell will be a better choice rather than scent flower. Alright, my apology, I will change that and update that to you. They will have sticky stigma, and of course, the anthers do not hang out of the flower. And this is the process of how pollination happens for animals. So coming back to this one, describe how J benefit from K. So now they're asking me that it is good for J. It is good for J to have insect K. And we know that J is an animal pollinated flower, right? Animal pollinated flower. So clearly if it's an animal pollinated flower, it will need pollinators, okay, which is animals. In this which case, insect K. All right. So they need us to describe how J benefits from K. Now, apart from just a simple pollination definition, which we always do, we can't do that for this one because clearly they already gave us this information that the male and the females are bare on different flowers. All right. So first thing first, we will need to show how insect K can obtain the pollen grain from the male flower buds. All right. So that I'll just put it down here. Okay, so the whole process would be the K, insect K, all right, will needs to go to the male flower. All right, to male flowers. It needs to go to the male flower first. And why should it go to the male flowers? They will have nectar, for instance, or brightly colored flower just to attract the animals to go towards them. So it needs to attract to the male flowers, and at the same time, the pollen grain will start attaching, okay, to the body of the insect K when they land on the flower. All right. Then, of course, the pollen grain attached, it would be transfer, right? Transfer to female flowers. When insect K move from the male flowers to the female flowers. All right. And once that happens, pollination can happen. Okay. And when pollination happens, they can continue to fertilize. They might go through fertilization, and they'll be able to develop into fruits and the seeds going forward. All right. So here we have to have all these things into our answer, because you have to specify about the male and the female parts found on different flowers. So some of them, they just simply give the definitions of pollinations. They just said that, okay, insect K transfer the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the flowers. Now that is not enough, because specifically they mentioned about male and female parts are on different flowers. So you have to show the difference as well. All right. So based on what we had, first we have insect K attracted to the male flower for the nectar. All right. Then we talk about during the feeding, the pollen grain will get attached to the body. All right. And lastly, then we talk about the pollination. Okay, as it moves to the female flowers, it will transfer the pollen grains to the stigma to pollinate their flowers. Okay, so we have to be specific about this, the sequence of events, because the parts are located on different flowers. All right, if your answer is just generic, you just said that the pollen grain transfer from the stigma to the anther, from the anther to the stigma, it will be incorrect. Okay, you will not be getting the 1 mark. Yes? Now next, question number 7. Okay, just by looking at the diagram itself, we know that it's about human reproduction. All right, so human reproduction is found on the summary map as well. It comes after the plant reproduction. Okay, just have a quick look here, and then we see what we have. Yep. Okay, let me just, reproduction in humans. So essentially, reproduction in humans, they are all sexual reproductions, and it involve a male and a female. All right, it involves a male and a female. Okay, then these are all the parts that you need to know for male reproductive system. The testis that produces the sperm, which is the male reproductive cells. All right, and of course, the female reproductive system, we have the ovaries, the womb, the vagina, and the fallopian tube. And usually they will only be focusing on this and this. Okay, yep. So what is the ovary? Ovary, they will be getting us the female reproductive cells. All right, and then the womb is the place where the fertilized eggs start developing into a baby. Okay? And in terms of the locations where fertilization happens, it happens in the fallopian tube. But using this term is not needed in the syllabus. All right, they might just ask you to label, where fertilization takes place, but they will not ask you to spell the fallopian tube. But the locations, they will just ask you to identify, like putting a cross, and you just have to put a cross here. Okay? Now, they might ask you to define fertilization. Essentially, for human reproduction, there's only one process that we need, which will be fertilization. Right? Unless in plant reproduction, there are 4 processes like pollination, fertilization, dispersal, and germination. In humans, we only have this process. Okay, and it's important to use the word fuse to show that the sperm fuses with the egg to cause fertilization. And after fertilization, it will start to divide, form many cells, and then the baby will develop after 9 months. Okay, so you might need to label the parts, like the cell membrane, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, which is a typical animal cell. All right, but the main structure of a sperm will not be tested. You wouldn't be needed to know about the middle, the head. At most, they might ask you what's the function of the tail, and the tail is actually to help the sperm to move. All right, and the essential thing, the more essential thing is the nucleus that is found inside. Okay, when they fuse, they will give rise to a new individual with both the characteristic from the egg cell and the sperm cell. Okay, so you also have this under umbilical cord. All right, umbilical cord connects the baby to the mom, And the main function is to supply nutrients and oxygen. Okay, and also to remove what waste materials and carbon dioxide that has been produced by the baby in the womb. Okay, now development of twins, as of now, I don't really see questions coming out on that, but essentially they might ask maybe in MCQ as an MCQ option. Okay, identical twins come from the same fertilized egg. Okay, and they got split. Please remember that one sperm only fertilizes one egg. Alright, identical twins are formed because the egg has already been fertilized and then they split into half. Now, non-identical twins have two different eggs that is fertilized by two different sperm. So you don't see that the two babies will look alike. Yeah. So then sometimes they will also ask you to compare between a human and a flowering plant. Yeah, the parts that they have and what happens after fertilization and the process. Okay. Now come back to the question number 7. So we have here in humans and in plants, what do we have? Like diagram 1 shows you from an egg cell, it becomes a fetus. A fetus essentially means a baby. All right, a fetus means a baby. So it says that the egg undergo one process to form the baby. And as we mentioned before, in humans, there's only one process, which is fertilization. Okay, but in diagram 2, we have a flower that has to go through two processes to become a fruit. All right, so we know that a fruit also encompasses the seed. So then to produce the seed, you need fertilization. And prior to fertilization, what process happens in the flowers to cause fertilization will be pollination. Okay, so once we identify all the processes here, the question asks us to describe. So when you're asked to describe, you have to give a variety of description about the process. Okay, so for fertilization, the main thing, as we mentioned just now, is that you must mention there's a fusion between the male and the female reproductive cells. Okay, so that's the main keyword that you need to have in your answer. All right, so because this is involving a plant, so your fertilization will have to talk about the pollen grains and the ovule. Okay, so I just put it this way for you. Male reproductive cell in pollen grain fuses with the female reproductive cells in the ovule found in the ovary. Alright, so if they ask you to describe fertilization in humans, then you have to talk about the male reproductive cells in the sperm fuses with the female reproductive cells in the egg cell or the ovum. Okay, now next. The fetus depends on the mother for its health through the umbilical cord. Explain why the fetus could not grow healthily when the umbilical cord is blocked. So now we have C1 is that the cord is blocked. C3 is that eventually it didn't grow healthy. Alright, so from C1, we need to know what is the concept. So what do we learn about the umbilical cord, the function of the umbilical cord? So if we can jump back to where we were just now, okay, so let me just pull back. Yes. So this is what we learned. This is what are the information provided in the summary map, that the umbilical cord will supply the nutrients and oxygen to the baby, as well as removing carbon dioxide and waste material. All right, so this is the function. So come back to this one. When it is blocked, it means that the function will be lost. Okay, so what would be lost is that the baby will not getting nutrients or oxygen. All right, and clearly when the baby is not getting nutrients or oxygen, okay, it will directly affect its health. Poor health or even its survival is threatened. All right, and not just that, remember it also helps to remove the waste material. Yep, so if the waste material again is not removed, it also leads on to poor health. All right, so poor health being is similar to not growing healthily, right? So I know this is my C3. Okay, yeah, so come back to this one. When you want to with all our C1, C2, C3 into our answer, you just have to put it this way. The fetus will not be getting the nutrients or digested food, so this is the same, depending on what your school requires, and unable to remove the waste material and carbon dioxide, and that's how the baby couldn't grow healthily. Okay? So again, to re-emphasize, what is an English answer? So if they ask you, hey, why the fetus couldn't grow healthily, and you end up your answer is C1, C3, oh, it could not grow healthily because the umbilical cord is blocked, stop. then you know that C2, or the whole chunk of C2, okay, which is what we learned in the summaries, in our notes, it's not in your answer. You know your answer is an English answer, and you will not be getting any marks for that. All right. Now the last question, question number 8. So the diagram shows the reproductive parts of a human and plants. So it's very common for them to compare human and plants, especially the ovaries. Okay, so they ask you, what is the similarity between X and D? So X is the ovary, D is also the ovary, and based on what we know about the function of the ovary, both they contain the female reproductive cells. All right, so we simply have to write down the similarity, which happens to be their function as well. This is where the female reproductive cells can be found. All right, the ovaries, or rather this one, yeah, the ovaries. The ovaries will have ovules inside which contain the female reproductive cells. Now, study the flower. Which of the following represent the part we have the same function as X and Y? So now the X, the function is our ovary, which is to produce the female reproductive cells. And we know that D has the same function. Okay, so that would be D. Now, what about Y? Y is the testis. Testis basically belongs to the male reproductive system that is producing and storing the male reproductive cell, MRC. All right, and this can be also found in the anther, which happens to be part B. All right, and this one I think we shouldn't be having any problem identifying because it's quite straightforward. Okay, now here, the diagram shows animal, the parts of an animal W, and based on it, you have to state one difference between humans and animal. Now, what I want to tell you is that during exams, they would never test you on general knowledge. Okay, so only use the fact provided for us that is within the syllabus that you have seen it before. So I do see some of the students, they start to talk about oocytes. Though they have no idea what oocyte is about. Then they will say, okay, oocyte can be found in animal W, but not in humans. My suggestion to you is that because we know that it will never be testing about general knowledge, and if that it's not common, this is a school exam question. It's not common that they will ask. Usually whatever they label will be helpful in answering the question. But in this particular, it's not. All right, it is not. Now you have to try to align and state the difference that you know, okay, or that you have learned about either in this animal or in humans. And obviously, we have never learned about animal W. So you got to find out something about the humans, all right, and that the human has or don't have that this animal has. All right. So one main obvious thing is that we can see there's ovary that has eggs, right? And at the same time, it also has sperms. Now, these are the ones that we know also found in humans. However, they are found in different humans, in the male and the female. Yeah. So, but for this animal, it has both this male and female reproductive cells. So that would be one of the difference. All right, it has both the female and the male, but humans have either the female or the male. Okay, that's number one. This is something that we have learned. All right, so we cannot say that it is test outside the syllabus. This is what we have learned. So we only use things that we have already learned. Try not to use any other things that we are not aware of. Okay, now the second thing is that we know that it says the eggs are in the uterus, but clearly in humans, the eggs will not be in the uterus, it will be in the ovary, right? Yeah, so that could also be another answer. Okay, so the eggs of animal W are found in the uterus, but in humans, they are found in the female, in the ovary of the female reproductive system. All right. So just look at whatever information that we have. Okay, and of course, because this is a reproduction question, whatever we have talked about the top parts, all right, so you must know how your school is crafting the questions. Should there be an experiment at the top? The application that follows usually will be using the information at the top or will be testing the same topic, or the same concept. Yep, so since it is a reproduction question, you would expect that the question down here will also be asking about human reproduction things. Okay, rather than start to focus about, hey, the intestine is found in different locations, the anus is found in different locations, you have to focus on reproduction for this question instead. All right, so this is how we generate craft the questions, and you will know what is the expected answers that you need. All right, so this will be it. You can have either one of the answers and try not to use things that is not present, because that might cause you to lose marks or not getting any marks at all, such as using oocyte or using anything that is not related to reproduction. All right. Okay, so this is the end of the revision for tutorial 11. All right, so just should you have any question you want to ask me despite going through this video link, just give me a shout during the class. All right, and do your corrections. I will put up the suggested solutions for the entire tutorial. So you have to complete the corrections. All right, and then you just submit back to me for marking and grading. We should only be having about 5 lessons left before you end of your exams. So just work hard. All right, strive together, work hard together, and then we work towards our AL1. Okay, bye bye.